Nope, that was collecting aluminum cans, just discarded cans along the roadways, yeah, and then going, in Adrian, it was going to the Meyer store to turn them in for deposit returns, yep. And that was something pretty much all the homeless people I met did, to some extent, yeah. And Elvis and Shirley were very good at it, and I would often see them with huge garbage bags stuffed with aluminum cans tied to their bikes.
You mentioned that at one time there were no facilities for single males. But now there is.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened between then and now? How did that come about?
Well, it happened after I left the area, I moved up to Ypsilanti, but it's a faith-based organization that is running this shelter. And at first it was just a winter shelter, and now it's year-round, I do know that. But there was quite a community conversation about, while I was still there, about this issue, and a lot of people talked about building a shelter. The different social services agencies talked about the feasibility, and the Salvation Army took a good hard look at possibly sponsoring a shelter there, but decided it just wasn't workable for them. So I'm not really sure of all the details about how this particular group decided they could do it, but they have, and it definitely filled a need, because for adults without dependent children, there were really very few options, but there was a very small shelter for women, single women with no dependent children at that time, but nothing for men.
Do you think any of your work may have influenced them, or wasn't it?
Well, it did seem that that the articles did generate more discussion about the shelter issue. I wasn't attending all those meetings before I started working on the stories, but we were invited, Laz Strayer and I were invited to attend their meetings, and were asked to talk about what we were experiencing. And they were very attentive to what we had to say. And one thing we talked about was just our experience of going to the soup kitchen and being with people, and we enjoyed getting to know people there, and it seemed that they also felt acknowledged and seen by the fact that we enjoyed interacting with them. And so one agency came up with the idea of what they call the homelessness mentoring program, and they were encouraging their staff members to come to the soup kitchen on their lunch break once in a while to sit and just talk to people and get to know them. And maybe then the idea was that maybe then some of the homeless people would feel like they could ask for help with filling out forms. Maybe the staff people would bring some of their paperwork for getting services, food stamps, or whatever it might be to help people just take that step. But I'm not sure it went all that far at least after I had moved away from that area. I don't think it's still going on there. But yeah, the idea of the shelter was certainly talked about a lot.
I guess I have a question. It seems like there's not a lot of shelters for women with children or men that have dependent children. What happens to those people? In this area, I'm not aware of.
Yeah, I certainly am not aware of all the different sheltering options there are for people, but it does seem to me that when children are involved, there are actually more options available. I know that there is I'm currently volunteering at the Delana Center in Ann Arbor, and I've been told there that there is a separate facility for families. And down in Adrian, yeah, there was definitely a place for women with dependent children. And I believe the shelter in Toledo that I was told about when I was there, I think they had a separate section for families. But I've been told that when there's children involved, there usually are more options. yeah.
I know in Ann Arbor there's definitely a separate home that puts up people, both women with young children and families, if they're in need. But again, it's based on the fact that they have children.
I was surprised when I was down there to learn just how many homeless children there were in that area. That each, under the McKinney-Vento Act, it's an act that was established in the Reagan administration, and it's now, I think, as part of No Child Left Behind, but it requires that each school district has a homelessness liaison, and districts can share liaisons, but they have to have somebody that's identified to coordinate with the state homelessness liaison and to ensure that when children's families, because of homelessness, move around, that the children are given transportation to go back to their same school. So in Adrian, I got to know the person who was the Adrian District Homelessness Liaison, and suddenly I was learning about how many homeless children there are, and most of them were moving around. They were what one researcher I met called couch homeless. They were moving from house to house, friends, family. But there were a few people who were living in their cars, and then parents and then worried that their children would be taken away from them because that's not considered a suitable condition for children, of course, or anybody. But it wasn't until later in the time that I was living down in Adrian that I actually saw more families and children coming to the soup kitchen. I didn't really see that many at first.
One thing that we've kind of struggled with here is in order to use some of the library services, it requires that you have the address. And if you're homeless, you don't have an address. So have you encountered any people who have put some kind of system in place where a person wouldn't have to have a permanent address or something? I'm just kind of throwing this out. I don't even know
Yeah,
the
yeah.
exact question.
Yeah, and it's a huge problem. The Delana Center, where I'm volunteering now, they allow people to sign up for mail service, and you don't have to be staying there as a resident to get your mail sent there. And so they fill out a form, and they're required to check it every 2 weeks. So a staff member signs that this person came and checked their mail. So yeah, that's one thing. And then in Adrian, they had a day shelter. It was called Interconnections, where people could just come and hang out. There was a computer, there was a pool table, but people could use the phone there, and also they could get mail there. So there are a few things like that, but it is a huge problem to not have a phone or to be able to check your mail regularly. And transportation issues. These are all things these are ways people connect with services and go places and try to find jobs. And
How would they get them in the mail?
what's that?
How would they get their disability checks and their stuff if they didn't have a mailing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, a lot of the people I knew who were receiving disability income did live in rental homes, kind of run down rental homes, but so they were probably getting it there. But yeah, that would be, if you didn't have that and you had to go somewhere else to get your mail, then yeah, you have to find a way to get there and get to the bank or whatever you had to do. And yeah, it's just things we think of as everyday kind of thing. They're just huge issues for some people.
Is it still against the law in some cities for people to go dumpster diving? Is it something they put people in jail for?
I don't know. I don't know the laws about that at all. I knew a lot of people in Adrian who regularly went through dumpsters, and that one piece I wrote, the woman talked about being yelled at, but I never have looked into what actual laws are about that.
I say especially on TV about people who collect food and as a community they come together and they serve that food, clean it and serve it and cook meals and feed a whole bunch of people.
You mean food from a dumpster?
I mean, it's picked up when it's, it's up, it's good, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Some grocery stores leave it in bags and they don't actually put it in the dumpster, they set it on the side because they know people are coming to eat it. Or kids go in afterwards.
Mhm.
and get stale bread, things like that before it gets to the dumpster. They let them have it.
Okay.
I mean, there's a whole system. Is that what Harvest,
Yeah, I know in Ann Arbor there's food gatherers
yeah,
that collects food from restaurants and
yeah, before they throw it away
before they throw it away.
and take it.
Mhm.
Well, a lot of that actually ends up being served at the shelters,
Right.
right? So, yeah, no, I think there are more organizations that, particularly with food, that are trying to both not waste as much and get it to the people who are really hungry. I'm sure there's still lots that is being missed.
I've heard the reason some people won't do that is because it costs more money and all the paperwork and stuff to do that than throw it away.
I
Or
can
they
believe
don't
that.
go. That's pretty sad.
Right.
Yes,
About that.
it's not good. It's not good to have a disincentive for people to help, I guess.
I came in late, so I apologize if you already mentioned this, but is there a disproportionate number of homeless who are veterans? It
There,
just kind of seems like a group that is often left homeless and there's not a lot of resources for them, so I just